Undying is tricky. Also, howdy, and welcome to What Truly Makes a Hero. Anyways, much like the Nyx Assassin video, this one is probably going to focus more on the god who our subject serves, rather than the subject himself. Also, unlike Nyx Assassin, the Undying doesn't remember his name. Actually, his name is a bit of a weird subject. Anyways, let's get the bio rolling.
Man up for a minute.
Oh man, I found a candy bar! Whoop.
How long has it been since he lost his name? The torn ruin of his mind no longer knows. Dimly he recalls armor and banners and grim-faced kin riding at his side. He remembers a battle, pain and fear as pale hands ripped him from his saddle. He remembers terror as they threw him into the yawning pit of the dead god alongside his brothers to hear the dirge and be consumed into nothingness. In the darkness below, time left him. Thought left him. Sanity left him. Hunger, however, did not. They turned on each other with split fingernails and shattered teeth. Then it came, distant at first, a fragile note at the edge of perception, joined by another, then another, inescapable and unending. The chorus grew into a living wall of sound pulsing in his mind until no other thought survived. With the dirge consuming him, he opened his arms to the dead god and welcomed his obliteration. Yet destruction was not what he'd been chosen for. The dead god demanded war. In the belly of the great nothing, he was granted a new purpose: to spread the dirge across the land, to rally the sleepless dead against the living. He was to become the Undying, the herald of the dead god, to rise and fall and rise again whenever his body failed him, to trudge on through death unending, that the dirge might never end. Alright, so Undying has retained some memories of his past life as a warrior. However, all of those memories involved battle, pain, or fear. I don't think the dead god did a crappy job of wiping his mind. I think the dead god purposefully left in the suffering and violence, so when the Undying looks back on himself, all he sees is what his new existence is: conquering, killing, converting. Also, it's notable that the bio describes pale hands ripping Undying from his saddle. To me, this says that he was attacked by a horde of the undead, as color is typically lost when a body decomposes. And what's interesting about that is that this wasn't a mindless horde. They grabbed Undying and his compatriots with a purpose greater than consuming: converting. What's more is that as the dirge is consuming Undying, what does Undying do? He opens his arms ready for oblivion. Well, how on earth does he know what's coming? Perhaps the dead god is a well-known entity. Perhaps stories have been told about the undead who take you away to be consumed by an eldritch force. But why is this different? Why this sudden switch-up? Instead of devouring Undying, the dead god steers him towards another purpose for conquest. Well, let's try and define what the dead god actually is. First off, the name, the dead god. This is a god who died. Somehow he still has influence in the world, or Undying wouldn't exist. Now it comes to identifying if this god is still alive in some way or is completely gone and all of his followers are worshipping something that isn't there. So what exactly do we know about the dead god? Well, we know that this dead god uses a dirge to control people. Now, a dirge is defined as a slow, somber funeral song. What's more is that the word itself stems from the Latin dirige, which means direct. This is because in the Middle Ages, hymns were often named by the few first words of their lyrics. So when the song Dirige I hate Latin. Domine Deus meus in conspectu tuo viam meam, or direct, O Lord, my God, my way in thy sight, was used for funeral services, the word caught on. And what a peculiar title of a song, too. Someone calling upon a god to help them direct themselves in God's sight. Well, that's pretty relevant to Undying, I'd say. For Undying, this dirge is not only a funeral song for the dead god himself, but also the dead god's commands. I think I kinda know what picture this paints for us, but let's cover all the bases we can.
Loot weapons and fuel. Find the vehicle bar. Kill zombies. Escape to safety. Be a part of soil.
There's not a whole lot to Undying. He's a zombie in armor. but there's one interesting detail I noticed. His armor is green. Now, what type of metal is green? Well, we know that when copper oxidizes, it becomes green. I mean, look at the Statue of Liberty. So Undying's armor was copper at one point. This does a good job communicating his age. Also keep in mind that the armor he wears is not indicative of the dead god. Notice how his full armor is absent, and all that's left is various scraps. This was the armor he was in when he became undead. We get nothing more about where Undying came from, but be on the lookout for any other Dota characters who have horns on their helmet. One hint we could take is the fact that he has 4 fingers. Now, trolls in the Dota 2 universe are infamous for having 4 fingers. Grimstroke, Huskar, and Witch Doctor all have 4 fingers. Now, Grimstroke's helmet has the peculiar feature of horns. Now, I might hear you say, Wilson, come on, these two have nothing in common with each other other than that. Undying has no East Asian aesthetics in his design. Well, consider this. Take a look at the scraps of chainmail he still has on him. It's very similar to Gyorin Kozane, I think I said that right, a type of ancient Japanese chainmail that takes after fish scales. His pauldrons also take after those found on ancient Mongolian armor, with some exaggerations in the design though. This might be a bit speculative, but I think Undying's origin lies in Grimstroke's home. Call it a stretch, call it schizo posting, it's my video and it's my crack theory. Anyways, moving on. The fact that Undying's face is shrouded in shadow says a lot about him. We don't even get to see his face, really. This tells us that he doesn't really have an individuality. He's just a cog in the dead god's machine. The fact that he's starved and has sharp teeth aims to provoke instincts of fear. This thing is hungry, and it's got sharp teeth. Time to run. I also think giving Undying a huge mouth is a good idea. Not only does it add onto the instinctual fear of being eaten, but also a large mouth lets him sing the dirge more effectively. Also, take note of the flies. They're more important than you think. Starting with the innate, it tells us that this whole zombies taking over the world with their funeral songs thing isn't going to stop until the dead god says so. Decay tells us that the strength of the living is simply borrowed from the strength of the dead. Now I'm wondering if this is the worldview of the dead god and his followers, or if the dead god is really part of the life cycle of the world. Do the living really borrow their strength from the dead in this world? Also note the sound and visual effects of this spell. Flies definitely have a connection to the dead god somehow. Soul Rip continues with the theme of manipulating the life force of others. The flavor text tells us that even allies feel despair when in the presence of Undying. Which, yeah, I would too. I don't think there's any magic power that makes people feel despair rather than just the knowledge that they're in the presence of a stinking, uncanny zombie in the service of the dead god. Also, the spell effect lacks flies, but it does leave a blood trail to the target. The fact that Undying can use blood to heal or harm is very curious, and tells us that blood is a force of life in the Dota 2 universe. This is going to be very relevant for a certain hero, but let's move on to Tombstone for now. Tombstone states that Undying calls upon his fallen brothers to aid in combat. Now I noticed 2 things about this tombstone. There's these runes upon it, and the skulls carry horns. My working theory is that this tombstone is an actual tombstone from Undying's home culture. The green runes, however, are the dead gods doing to raise the corpses to life. We can see this in the fact that when the tombstone dies, the zombies go as well. It's the dead god's power that keeps them alive. Flesh Golem goes crazy. The flesh of the recently dead add to the power of Dirge's plague. Again, the sound effect is a bunch of flies buzzing around. Funny how the other spell that gives Undying strength also includes flies. The flies are acting as couriers for the dead god, manipulating the strength of others for his own use in conquest, taking it away from others and bringing it to Undying. Also, plague is an interesting choice of words, considering this is the only mention of a plague in Undying's entire kit. I wonder if there are any other heroes with green plague magic. Yeah, nothing really comes to mind. After going through all of Undying's spells, yeah, I'm starting to think that maybe this dead god is part of this world's life cycle. I guess the only question we're left is, why is he breaking his part of the cycle to wage war on the living? Well, we'll find some answers here, I think. And to help us delve into Dirge's dialogue, I have a very experienced Undying player here to break down what the dickens this zombie is yapping about.
Hello everybody, my name is Scurvy Dog, and I'm going to be your resident expert on Undying for this video. I have just under 700 games on Undying, and this is actually the hero I spammed to get to my highest rank in Dota, which was rank 396 Immortal. So you could basically say that Undying and I are the same guy. But it's kind of weird how comical Undying is. The line between obvious memes and character traits is pretty blurry. Like, does he actually know Invoker from the past?
Carl, is that you?
Or is this just a reference to that one leaked, mistranslated patch from forever ago? Or what about the whole gummy vitamins thing? Whatever the case, it's surprising how much Undying knows for supposedly being a brainless zombie. He knows the narrow maze.
I will never see your maze.
He's also very aware of his situation.
Again and again, I live and die. No hells, no heavens, only this.
And he seems to want out of it all.
Does it end, Death Prophet?
Despite this, he still carries the attitude of a loyal soldier. He's fighting for the dead god against his own will, but he still carries the dead god's sentiments.
Against the living, all will die.
Undying also mentions conversion to his victims, especially Wraith King and Sand King.
We welcome kings and tyrants.
This can be read two ways. Either the dead god has a problem with kings and tyrants because they challenge his authority, or that Undying himself dislikes kings and tyrants, wanting them to be another corpse in the dead god's legions to bring them down from their high place. Judging by what Undying really thinks of what he's doing, the latter sounds more plausible. Undying feels very ironic at times, and it really seems like he uses humor to deal with the burden of his situation. He's not a mindless ghoul following orders. Much like any soldier, he's still a person with hopes and wants that would rather be at peace than at war. In his past life, he was probably the light of his army, cracking jokes to get his fellow soldiers through tough times. All of that is gone now, and all that's left is a dead god song to keep him company.
To me, Undying speaks a lot to a Bible verse I think about a lot. Romans chapter 7, verse 15. For that which I do, I know not. For what I would do, that I do not. But what I hate, that I do. Undying doesn't want any of this, and yet he does it anyway, hating it all the way. His voice line about no heavens and no hells isn't one said in pride, but one said in despair. He's a tragic character, carried into circumstances entirely against his strength and will. As for the dead god, I think he's something of a decomposer for the planet. After all, he seems to use flies to do his bidding, and decay and rot are constant themes around Undying. But why is he rebelling? Why is he attacking the world? I think it's because he's dead. Why else would his minions sing a funeral song constantly? And he's not exactly handling his death well. Waging war against the living sounds like someone's not happy that they're deceased, and they're going to make that the entire world's problem. The dead god is throwing a tantrum, using the life force he's consumed over the centuries as a decomposer to drag the whole world into his own domain of stagnation and death. Much like Undying, he is living in death, unaccepting of its finality despite his own self being so intrinsically tied to it and the cycle it inhabits. The dead god just doesn't let go when he should, and behold, the fruits of his labor. And another hero down. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I look forward to seeing what you guys think about Undying's tragedy and the dead god's inability to let go of his pride. With that said, let's give the wheel a spin to see who's up next. Pangolier. What are the chances I get Quinn to collab on this one, huh? Seriously though, if any pros or casters or panelists are watching, getting a Quinn collab would be unbelievably baller. Anyways, that's all from me. God bless, and until next time.